Hey, all you cool cats and kittens, as our friend Carol Baskin would say. Well, welcome to video 3, our lesson on the Beowulf poet and on Beowulf part 1. You should have gotten the assignment to go ahead and complete this worksheet that's on your screen right now, the Beowulf poet. We're not going to spend much time talking about this per se because a lot of this information is going to be talked about while we're reading Beowulf. Along with the author info sheet, and get used to these, you'll be getting a lot of these throughout the year. You, of course, have what you've missed since 10th grade and 8th grade, your reading guides. So here's your reading guide for Beowulf. You were asked to read part 1, which is pages 42 through 45. I kept the reading kind of light so that we could just kind of get used to the language and get used to Beowulf. What I'm going to have on the screen, I'll go ahead and actually have the reading guide up on the screen in case you want to refer to it. And I will go ahead and read and discuss the important parts just like we would if we were in class. So I guess without further ado, let's go to page 42 in your textbook and let's just jump right into it. The very first thing you're going to notice on page 43 is that dark picture, kind of looking down. I'm sorry, you're kind of looking up. This picture should set the mood for us. Very dark, very almost like an impending doom is coming. So we'll go ahead and look at that a little later as far as mood and tone goes. So let's take a look at what's in italics on page 42. This is kind of an introduction to kind of set the scene for us because this is just a section of Beowulf, not the entire story. So it's very important to follow along with these helps that kind of fill in the gaps for us, and also serves as a little summary and a little flash forward or foreshadowing, or maybe even a spoiler. So let's go ahead and read that. Hrothgar, king of the Danes, let's start over, sorry. Hrothgar, king of the Danes, has built a wonderful mead hall called Harrod, where his subjects congregate and make merry. As this selection opens, a fierce and powerful monster named Grendel invades the mead hall, bringing death and destruction. So already in just these 4 lines, there's a lot of stuff you already know. You know what a mead hall is. A mead hall is where the king's friends and those around him would gather together and eat, drink, be merry, hear stories of heroes and whatnot. And we know the name of the mead hall is Harrod. We know the king, Hrothgar, and we also know that Grendel, who is a powerful and fierce monster, invades the mead hall. So this little section that we're going to focus on today is actually all about Grendel and that. So let's go ahead and look at that. Grendel, page 42. A powerful monster living down in the darkness growled in pain, impatient, as day after day the music rang. Loud in that hall, the harp's rejoicing call, and the poet's clear song, sung of the ancient beginning of us all, recalling the Almighty making the earth, shaping these beautiful plains marked off by oceans, then proudly setting the sun and the moon to glow across the land and light it. The corners of the earth were made lovely with trees, and leaves made quick with life, and with each of the nations who now move on its face. I want to point out just a couple things here. First of all, notice the caesuras. If you remember from your notes and even from the beginning of this reading guide, a caesura is that break, that pause in the middle of a line of poetry that helps it keeps the I'm at a loss for words here. It keeps the rhythm going, and it also helps the reciter of the poems who memorize this stuff. It helped them out. But notice how it also builds suspense. A powerful monster living down in the darkness growled in pain, impatient, as day after day the music rang loud in that hall, the harp's rejoicing call and the poet's clear songs. Notice how those pauses are there for dramatic effect. Let's read on. And then, as now warriors sang of their pleasure, so Hrothgar's men lived happy in this hall, till the monster stirred, that demon, that fiend, Grendel, who haunted the moors, the wild marshes, and made his home in a hell, not hell, but earth. He, Grendel, was spawned in that slime, conceived by a pair of those monsters born of Cain, murderous creatures banished by God, punished forever for the crime of Abel's death. Well, that's very interesting. You all know that the Anglo-Saxon period began before Christ. But I also told you that as time went on, elements were added to the oral tradition, to the stories. So here we have a lot of not Christianity, but Christianity. But we have reference to Cain and Abel. That's very interesting. Now we all know that Cain, of course, committed the first murder, the first true sin against another human being. And notice who Grendel is. Grendel is being said to be a descendant of Cain, conceived by a pair of those monsters born of Cain. So here the poet is setting up Grendel as evil in the universal theme that this epic addresses, the battle between good and evil. Now we haven't seen the good yet, but we know enough, and we're hearing how evil Grendel is. He stirred that demon, that fiend who haunted the moors. He was he was spawned in slime. Notice the imagery there, and notice the side note for line 19. Spawned means he was given birth in that slime. Very interesting. Good writing here. Line 23. The Almighty God drove those demons out, and their exile was bitter. Shut away from men, they split into 1,000 forms of evil. Spirits and fiends, goblins, monsters, giants, a brood forever, opposing the Lord's will, and again defeated. So we're seeing the idea of good and evil. We're seeing the idea of God versus the devil. We're seeing a lot of those universal themes that I told you about in the introduction. So that's just the beginning. Really good stuff here. Let's go to line 30. Also, be sure you're looking at your reading guide here. We're about on page, about number 8 here. We're not going to go through the reading guide question by question, but of course, if you have questions, like I said, email me, call me, text me, get my number, and we can go from there. But my virtual learners, my absent people, pay attention to what we're talking about. I'm going to do my best to point out all the important stuff, and along with your reading guides, you can follow along very well. So let's go ahead and look at line 30. Then, when darkness had dropped, Grendel went up to Herod, wondering what the warriors would do in that hall when their drinking was done. He found them sprawled in sleep, suspecting nothing, their dreams undisturbed. So, we all know what happens in mead halls. I explained it to you. And so at the end of their night, they were done. They were sleeping it off. And Grendel went up to Herod in the middle of the night, once darkness happened. Let's see what happens. The monster's thoughts were as quick as his greed or his claws. He slipped through the door, and there in the silence snatched up 30 men, smashed them, unknowing in their beds, and ran out with their bodies, their blood dripping behind him, back to his lair, delighted with his night's slaughter. So Grendel kills or steals 30 men. 30 grown men. The men closest to the king. Warriors. This should give us an indication of the size and the destruction that Grendel can do. This should give us some indication of the monstrous size of this creature and the evil that he is. Line 41. At daybreak, with the sun's first light, they saw how well he had worked, and in that grey morning broke their long feast with tears and laments for the dead. Hrothgar, their lord, sat joyless in Heorot, a mighty prince mourning the fate of his lost friends and companions, knowing by its tracks that some demon had torn his followers apart. He wept, fearing the beginning might not be the end. And that night Grendel came again, so set on murder that no crime could ever be enough, no savage assault quench his lust for evil. Then each warrior tried to escape him, searched for rest in different beds, as far from Heorot as they could find, seeing how Grendel hunted when they slept. Distance was their safety. The only survivors were those who fled him. So he came back. Grendel is bent on destruction. Grendel knows that no one can beat him. So, what's he gonna do? He's coming back for more and more. And he killed more men. And notice the last sentence on page 44, just 3 little words, but very important words. Hate had triumphed. Again, let's connect this to the universal themes that epics oftentimes use or explore. Good versus evil, hate versus love. Now we're thrown right in here. This is typically Anglo-Saxon. Remember how I told you not much happiness in Anglo-Saxon literature. It was all about the struggle, all about the need to survive, all about the warriors. Well, here we are, right at the beginning of Beowulf, and hate has triumphed. Very important, the way that this story, the way that this epic poem is being set up. Line 59, the top of page 45. So Grendel ruled, fought with the righteous, one against many, and Grendel won. So Heorot stood empty and stayed deserted for years, 12 winters of grief for Hrothgar, king of the Danes, sorrow heaped at his door by hell-forged hands. Are we getting a good feeling about Grendel right now? Are we feeling sorry for Hrothgar right now? Heorot stayed empty for 12 years. That's a long time. That's how long Hrothgar and his men both mourned, but also remember, at least 30 plus some of his men were killed by Grendel. So it takes a while to replenish, so to speak. Not good. Line 64, talking about Hrothgar here. His misery leaped the seas, was told and sung in all men's ears. Everyone was talking about Hrothgar's misery, even overseas. How Grendel's hatred began, how the monster relished his savage war on the Danes, keeping the bloody feud alive, seeking no peace, offering no truce, accepting no settlement, no price in gold or land, and paying the living for one crime only with another. Grendel wanted nothing but war. Grendel didn't want money. Grendel didn't want fame. Grendel didn't want peace. He just wanted war. No one waited for reparation from his plundering claws. That shadow of death hunted in the darkness, stalked Hrothgar's warriors, old and young, lying and waiting, hidden in mist, invisibly following them from the edge of the marsh, always there, unseen. So mankind's enemies continued his crimes, killing as often as he could, coming alone bloodthirsty and horrible. Though he lived in Heorot, when the night hid him, he never dared to touch King Hrothgar's glorious throne, protected by God, God whose love Grendel could not know. And here we see just how evil Grendel is. See, Grendel had taken over Herod. He had lived in Herod. But he never once touched Herod's throne because it was touched by God. And what the Beowulf poet is showing us here is that Grendel is truly the personification of evil, that he can never know God's love. So we're seeing set up the ultimate battle between good and evil. Extremely important lines here. Line 81 through 84. I'm sorry, 85. I'll read them again. Though he lived in Herod, when the night hid him, Grendel never dared to touch King Hrothgar's glorious throne, protected by God, God whose love Grendel could not know. But Hrothgar's heart was bent. The best and most noble of his council debated remedies, sat in secret sessions, talking of terror and wondering what the bravest of warriors could do. So even though Hrothgar was defeated and sad and mourning still 12 years later, those around him, his counselors, so to speak, they were trying to come up with a plan. How can we take our place back? How can we kill Grendel? How can we rid ourselves of this affliction that is on us, this evil that is on us? Line 90. And sometimes they sacrificed to the old stone gods, made heathen vows, hoping for hell's support, the devil's guidance in driving their affliction off. That was their way, and the heathen's only hope. Hell always in their hearts, knowing neither God nor his passing as he walks through our world, the Lord of heaven and earth. Their ears could not hear his praise nor know his glory. Let them beware, those who are thrust into danger, clutched at by trouble, yet can carry no solace in their hearts, cannot hope to be better. Hail to those who will rise to God, drop off their bodies, and seek our Father's peace. And we are set up to meet Beowulf next time. But let's take a look at the reading guide just a moment. Make sure, obviously, you know who the King of the Danes is. That's Hrothgar. Know about Herod and what they do, but also what happens at Herod. Go ahead and look for some alliteration for me. Find some kennings in there. Go ahead and really focus on your reading guide. We are going to have some kind of test about Beowulf at the end of the story. And my virtual people, I am always available for you. Just let me know what you need. So go ahead and make sure you understand the story. Make sure you have your reading guide completed accurately as well as completion. And if you think of anything you might need, just reach out. I will be in touch soon on Google Classroom with your next assignment as far as reading part 2 of Beowulf and completing the reading guide, letting you know what to read and answer, and then we will go from there. So good luck, we miss you, and we will be in touch. Bye-bye.